government officials tend to think that patriotism is the support of government, and that when you don't support the government of the day, you are unpatriotic. And I recall Professor Yusuf quoting, I think, Mark Twain.
Mark Twain, yeah.
He was quoting Mark Twain and saying that, look, patriotism is love of country, not love of government of the day. And so when Alhaji Aliko Dangote talks about patriotism, yes, patriotism is very important, particularly as we have seen many Nigerians who seem to have given up on the country. Many of them, even Professor Yusuf, that we interviewed earlier, was saying, well, I have another passport, but I believe in Nigeria. Yeah. And I think it's important that a person like Alhaji Aliko Dangote, who is a major symbol, an icon, a major employer of labor, stresses the point about patriotism. Talked about agriculture. Well, we talk about agriculture all the time. Even the present government talks about agriculture, food security. The food inflation is 16.1%, up from 15.8 in July. It went up to 16.1. So what kind of agriculture are we talking about? Is it subsistence farming? Is it mechanized farming? What is the level of support for agriculture? What exactly is being done in returns? Not just by the federal government that talks about it all the time. All these state governments, what are they doing? We have land. We have, very fertile flora and fauna. So that's also important. On COVID, which you refer to, COVID, which is the new issue of the age. Don't let us say of the year, because we don't know how long it will last and the impact long term. I think he needs to be personally commended for what he has been able to do, providing leadership within the private sector, along with others, to ensure that the private sector and the government have been working together to mitigate the effect, the impact, the implications of COVID-19. So he is somebody you can say, he ended on the note of patriotism. He is someone you can say has shown good example with regard to patriotism. Whether he supports government or not of the day is another issue.
That's another issue.
Thank you for that. So moving on from there, restructuring of the Nigerian state in every public conversation at the moment, more often than not, seems to paint the picture of a conscious political reconfiguration of the country to accommodate the interests of different subgroups. However, there are those who say that if by any chance the pro-restructuring Nigerians eventually get their wish, the economic variance of restructuring must be achieved for the exercise to be considered truly representative and effective. Can there be political restructuring without economic restructuring? What needs to be tinkered on in the political front in order to be able to achieve the sort of economic independence that was the hallmark of the First Republic of Nigeria? And that's the million-dollar question. Joining us now to look at all of this in greater relief, in addition to other key developments in the polity, is Professor Ebere Onwudiwe, political scientist and economist, and Chief Executive Officer of the O Analytics Research and Development Initiative. Welcome to the program, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, Prof. Good morning.
Good morning, Ruben. How are you?
I feel abandoned. Ruben. You and your brother, you abandoned me.
Anyway, you left us now.
Prof, it's good to see you. You people are enjoying Abuja on our behalf. Anyway, quickly, Prof, I know you've written a lot on this subject, federalism, the national question, and all of that. But how should we shape the conversation around restructuring? What is restructuring? People say it means a lot and all that, but are there core issues that we need to focus on as citizens?
Okay, well, you see, I think people who don't like to hear about restructuring always start this confusing question about it, saying that there are too many interpretations of restructuring, and so we don't have a handle as to what it actually is. But all people are talking about in restructuring is to end the extreme centralization of power in a way that will cut down the size of federal government and give more power to the states. give states more powers and resources to implement those powers. And so we are talking about constitutional devolution of power that will restrict the work of federal government to some specific areas, including defense, foreign policy, economic policy, and the protection of minority rights in the Federal Republic and others. So I think what needs to be done is for us to actually stop telling dubious stories about what people are asking for when they say they want to restructure the country. Because the people who want to restructure Nigeria are people who want one Nigeria. They are people who want to be part of this country, because I believe, like every other person does, that it is the best thing for all Nigerians. And therefore, when you oppose restructuring, you are indirectly saying to those people that they can take the highway if they want. I think the most important thing to do is for federal government to understand the frustration that is leading people to demand restructuring of the federation. And many important federal governments around the world, including the one that we borrowed from our presidential system from the United States, at one point restructured. The United States used to be a government of confederal states. It had the Articles of Confederation, which was so strong on the side of the states that the Federalists, those who wanted more power to the center, required the change, required restructuring. And so that's why they call the Constitutional Convention, to make sure that the federal government will get more power than it had. And that's what we're saying here now. In our own case, the reverse is the case. We have too much power at the federal level. And we want, at the central power level, we want to revisit those areas of power concentration and see that more power will be devolved to the states, just as they just did the opposite in the states, like I just said. Because, in the past, at the period of these Articles of Confederation, the states were so powerful in America that the federal government was not even allowed to tax citizens of the states, because the citizens were considered citizens of the states first before they were citizens of federal government, of the United States, the country itself. And so the federal government had no authority to tax them. Only the states can tax them. So the federal government was potentially broke. And they couldn't even raise an army, because the army will come, you have to get the permission of the states because they are citizens of the states. So the power was so much on the state side. Now it is the same case in Nigeria, except in the reverse. And our people are saying that, look, it is time to revisit this structure and change it a bit. I think that's what restructuring is all about. There is no gainsaying about that. There is nothing confusing. There is no abracadabra. The point is there is too much concentration of power in that list that is reserved for the central government. If I was the government, if I had anything to do about it, I will get non-partisan people to come together, or even partisan people, to come together and look at that 64 listings of responsibilities and see the ones that will go to the states, because not so many of them will be useful, is now useful at the national level. All it does is concentrate power, and this concentration of power causes bloating of government, which leads to a lot of abuse. So that's what I would say on restructuring.
Thank you, sir. But actually, with regards to the definitions and parameters and what have you, it's actually more than...
Hello?
Can you hear me, sir?
I was, yeah, I can hear you now, but I lost you guys for a while there.
Good to have you back. So I was asking you about the fact that different definitions and parameters have actually gone beyond just an academic discussion. Restructuring was mentioned in APC's manifesto on which they came into power on their change agenda. It is an election, it's a campaign promise. So people have to hold them to this promise. They should not have included it in their manifesto if they had no intention of actually carrying it out. How is the most effective way for Nigerians to hold them to the promise on which they were elected?
Well, anyway, to hold any government or any party in power responsible on the promises on which they were elected, all you have to do is, in a democracy, is pressure politics. You have to do the kind of things that the people wanting restructuring are doing now. You have to pressure the government. In a democracy, you pressure the government, and those who oppose you will also pressure the government, and ultimately decision will be made at the point of equilibrium between these competing groups. And that's all they have to do, is pressure the government. It's get these groups that are interested in one area, always pushing their case until the government does what they prefer or makes policy that's closer to their preferences. That's what you do. There's nothing else to do, because you can't take up arms against the government.
Okay, so Prof, I like the analogy you gave because I've been a great fan of Hamilton's Federalist Papers, and the fight for a federal state and the powers of the Confederation. And the power got so much to an extent where the Confederation got it, that when Lincoln came into power and he was talking about, okay, let's stop the slavery thing and the likes, the Confederates didn't like it. And at some point, when they disagreed with Lincoln, they had to, secede from America. That led to the Civil War because of slaves and the freedom of slaves. I'm asking here that some people's sentiment is the fact that if we restructure, states that might have secessionist tendency, isn't that just going to be sort of like a fait accompli for them? They will just take that and say, okay, we don't really want to be part of the structure and unit. Let's just leave.
Oh, well, I think that's good thinking, but I don't believe that's going to happen. Because, you see, as I said, the people that are looking for restructuring are the people that actually want to stay in Nigeria. Those who don't want to stay in Nigeria, they are separationists. So the best bet is to go the path of restructuring. And restructuring is not a big deal. All it will take is to look at the list that is left for the federal government, for the central government, and remove some responsibilities and give those responsibilities to the states, along with the resources to implement those responsibilities. That's what the fight is all about. It's not that everything has to be concentrated at one level, because it leads to the bloating of government and it leads to abuse. And you see, I listened to the last speaker there, and he was making all these points about the governors. I think he has good points about that. But the point is that this discussion is not about governors. This discussion is about restructuring. So we should not let ourselves be confused by some kind of argument that's not related to the point. The whole issue is about restructuring. It's about our federalism. You see, the function of federalism is to limit government by creating two sovereign powers. In our case, in Nigeria, we created three. And actually, it is Nigeria's contribution to the theory of federalism. But it is generally two sovereign powers, the national government and the state government. And the national and the state government are restrained in their influence by federalism. That's what federalism is all about. It's not concentrating power and making one much bigger than the other. as we have it now. That's why we had those struggles in the United States. And also, we are operating a presidential system of divided powers, in which case we did not only limit the power of the national government by federalism, but we're also limiting the power of the federal government internally through the separation of powers. And so we subdivided power even at that level, because it is not good to concentrate power. So even at the level of the national government, the Constitution separated powers, judicial powers, executive powers, and legislative powers, giving them different powers and forcing them to share these powers, so that it is also not part of creating a stable polity if you have a government that is encroaching on the powers of the other branches. So all these two things, the people who put them together are not stupid. They put them together so we can have a stable polity under which we can have continuous economic development, because you cannot develop economically under political instability. Well, so Prof, it is very, very important to understand that. Yes, please.
Prof, let's unpack this a little bit more. You're talking about reducing the functions assigned to the federal government under the exclusive list, and reducing the concentration of power. But are there other dimensions that we need to worry about? Because if you look at the 1960-1963 Constitution, we had what you could call federalism, and yet Nigeria imploded. The crisis in the Western region, the Civil War. So reducing the exclusive list, how much of a guarantee would that be for peace, progress, and stability with regard to many other issues that we contend with in Nigeria? Are there other dimensions to this issue beyond the reduction of
well, you know, I think well, yes, I think there is a human element. You know, there is no perfect system. You still have people who come and abuse power, even when the structures, when the institutions are there. So yes, but we cannot throw out what is good because we cannot get what is perfect. What is good is to create stability and unity and one country where people can compete. Because our problem is not just political, our problem is also economic. And the reason why we're having economic problems is because the competition between the states have almost disappeared. I mean, why would there be competition when at the end of every month, everybody comes and gets some monies given to them from the federal account? So definitely, even if you're at the individual level, if you're spoiling a child like that, they will never be useful. So it is the same thing that is happening to the states, and it is universal among the states. Some states are doing better than others, but a lot of them are not doing a lot in generating revenues, own revenues, or internally generated revenues, as it's called. They're not doing that. They're not making a lot of economic investments. They're not producing a lot. And this is because they're getting free money. So we have to find a way to end this free money. And we have to find a way to let the states that cannot survive by hard work, let them be merged with other states. Let them disappear. Let them be merged with other states. Because this splintering of states, creating states that are not viable, is what is giving the federal government too much power also. Because, of course, the states are not strong enough to fight back. They are not all states are like Lagos that fought back when they had issues with OBJ's government and local government. So we have, the more you carve them out into these tiny little do-nothing states in terms of generating revenue, then they become dependent. And when they become dependent, it defeats the purpose of federalism. And so yes, we have other ways we can look at it. That competitiveness is another way. We have to find a way, maybe give states, the federal government can say, states, look, in 5 years, we'll stop giving you free money. Now we're going to be giving you money from federal account through some grants in aid formula or something, so that we're going to give you money that we can monitor what you do with it. Because, the Prof. Yusuf, he had a point about that, that they collect these monies and they're not monitored. And I think somebody was giving, I think Rufai was giving great examples of how it happened in the past with the Western government. But what was it that was happening in the past? It was great competition. It was great competition between those regions. And so that competition pulled everybody up. Now there is no competition. Everybody's waiting for the end of the month so that they can get the Niger Delta money, which is Nigerian money, and they pocket it and do what they like with it. I had the selective revelations of Yusuf pointing to the abuse of Niger Delta NDDC, forgetting the Northeast in his rendition of abuses of how states do these things. So we have to go beyond that. We have to look for what is better for the whole country. And what is better for the whole country is that states should go back to where they belonged, where they were carved out from before, if they cannot survive on their own. Because if they cannot survive on their own, they become preyers to federal government, and then there is no amount of restructuring that is going to give powers to the level of achievement we expect as we had them back in our historical past.
So
those states were powerful. I mean, those regions were powerful, yes.
Prof, let's go back to our historical past. What exactly do you have in mind as the ideal model for Nigeria? Do we return to the regions of the First Republic, or do we stick to the 6 geopolitical zones we have now? Are we to have a president and prime minister model, premiers? What exactly do you have in mind?
Well, I wouldn't mind the 6 geopolitical zones. I wouldn't mind that. I know Zeke proposed 8 such governing units during his time. This is our problem. I think Ruben talks about it. I've been watching you guys since morning, and I think he mentioned the Willings Commission. Our problem didn't start today. Our problem didn't start today. Our federalism was not built on the basis of power, of checking of powers, like I described in the case of the United States, or like I described just the theoretical description of federalism, those division of powers. Our federalism was built on fear of ethnic domination. That's how it was built. That's why you had the Willings Commission. The Henry Willings Commission was to take care of the fears of the minorities. Minorities were afraid that there would be the 3 main ethnic groups of fighting against the domination of each by the other. That's why we settled on federalism. We didn't settle on federalism to separate powers and to check the powers of federal government. It's to check the powers of each ethnic group from domination. That's deep distrust at the beginning. That's why we had our federalism. And that fear is still on the table. So it didn't start today. We should have a historical perspective on it. So what would be the best way? I would think that if you have stronger regions like we had before, I don't think we will ever go back to those 3 regions or 4 regions, counting Bendel or the former Midwest. So, but I wouldn't mind considering favorably the 6 geopolitical zones. So we would have states that have some backbone, that have some economic backbone, and that will now come up with innovative ideas on their own that other states can copy. I've been doing a series on innovative states that other states can copy, so that they will not all spend money trying to find out new things. If Kaduna has great ideas on education, then somebody in Imo State can copy it if he's running the place, and somebody in Oyo State may copy it. So those are kinds of areas that I think we should go to. We should stop giving free monies to the states after a while and put fires on these governors to raise own income, to raise taxes, to attract investors, to do productive things in the economy, so that they are the governments that's closer to the people. They are able to satisfy the needs of the people. So that, I think, is going to be a very important way to look at it.
Okay, Prof, I've got two questions for you. Number one will be...
Yes.
Number one will be the internal wranglings, even among tribes and minority groups in those geographical specifications that would have emerged if we even have a sixth geopolitical zone. Prof, if you're a professor of history too, you know the history, political science and historical existence of Nigeria, you remember that even when the British came, the Yorubas were at war, for instance. We've got the 100-year war. We're fighting ourselves amongst the Egbas and the Jebus and the likes. If you finally give us these regions, if we finally get these regions, will these fights, these fault lines, internal Yoruba or inside Igbo fault lines, will they not emerge? And secondly, I want you to talk me through what will be a good deal for you, restructuring or Igbo presidency, or both restructuring and Igbo presidency at the same time?
Well, you know, the best thing I would think is that this country reaches a point in its development, in its political development, where the term Igbo, Yoruba, Fulani, Hausa, Ibibio, Ijaw president will become something that will make people look at you as if you're crazy. So yes, but at this point, I think that one thing that is lacking, one of the things that is pushing people for restructuring, I think Ms. Abiola has mentioned it when she was questioning the lady and the Professor Yusuf, I think that's his name. But in any case, she said, like, people want some, don't want to be dominated. People want some fairness. People want some justice. And if you look at the current situation, you can see that there is need for fairness and justice. And if you don't have fairness and justice in any government, be it state or local government, you will have the problems. So my hope is that when we decentralize power, that they will include in their behavior respect for fairness and justice, so that every other subgroup within the state will not have a need to ask for restructuring. And I think this is quite possible. It's quite doable, because in such a government, if we restructure, then we will make sure that our federal government will have the constitutional authority to protect the power, to protect the interest of minorities in the states. Even when power has been devolved, we have to nationalize Nigerian citizenship. We have to nationalize it. It has to be equal everywhere. It has to be equal everywhere. Where that citizenship is abused by the state, the federal government will have the might to intervene in protection of the minority group that is there. So there are so many ways to allay the fear that you correctly express, because there's so much multiplication of ethnic groups, and yes, the fear, as I said, the Willings Commission was there So the fear is still there, it's still with us. These ethnic groups are still with us, but we can manage it. We can manage it by the federal government taking our citizenship very seriously, protecting Nigerian citizens no matter where they are. So we would have it in our constitution such that the citizen of this country will not be abused by any government, state or local.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Ebere Onwudiwe, for joining us. There are some people who even go a step further and say that the sections dealing with policy and citizenship should even be made justiciable. Big argument there about citizenship. And there are some people who say, well, we don't have citizens yet because there's no level playing field in the country. Thank you very much, Professor Onwudiwe, for joining us on the morning show.